somewhere. Yeah,
I bet they're all sat in a warehouse at Red Hall, kind of all that. There's your blues and there's your whites and there's your yellows and your oranges and your blacks, and then there's your reds. You definitely don't need red, amber, and black for ages. Although I have to say, I noticed on some of the knockoff kind of souvenir stalls, some guys still had Bradford scarves on it. I thought, bloody hell, how long have you had them?
There was a flag we saw as we walked in, wasn't there? That there was one guy still selling a Cass at the Grand Final flag, and Rob wouldn't buy it. No. I was really disappointed in him.
He wouldn't even make him an offer, would he? Of a quid or two? No.
You think you could at least resell it?
Half-time. The half-time shenanigans, not what we want to see, apart from I was quite enamoured to see Romain Navarrete stand up against 6 Warrington players to defend his little mate. But
You mean second best prop in the league according to the Man of Steel, Romain Navarrete? We need to give him his full title.
I have to confess, I was at completely the wrong end of the ground. I haven't seen it back, so I have nothing to comment about it because I haven't seen it. I've got the Arsene Wenger defence out. I haven't seen it.
All I saw at the time was a bunch of people rush in, so I knew something was going on. What I couldn't see was any of the shenanigans beforehand, the bottling, and everybody around me swiftly came to the conclusion that, Tompkins must have said something, and that's kicked everything off. Just given he had been involved in this, so he's like, he must have said something.
I did think the shoving would have been around Tompkins and Clark, but it wasn't, was it? It was no. So Alan, for you, Alan, and for anyone listening who's not seen it back, basically a few bottles started coming onto the pitch from the Warrington end towards the players. And indiscriminately, because Warrington players were there as well as Wigan players, but obviously aiming for Wigan players. And Morgan Escaray sort of sarcastically clapped at the fans for sort of their bad behaviour. And then, whilst that was going on, Goodwin, who'd actually had a little bit of a flare-up with Escaray in the last 5 minutes of the half, gave him a big shove, and Romain Navarrete from the side walking in from the substitutes area sort of thing, saw this and obviously wanted to defend his little mate, so goes in like cocked ready if anyone wants to start out, and basically starts getting into a shoving match with about 5 Warrington players, and then it just seemed to peter out pretty quickly after that, to be honest. They all realised that we don't want to mess with Romain.
Yeah, and then John Clark started sort of trying to get involved to sort of half split it up and then half also have a bit of a dig himself.
It's kind of like that scroty lad at the pub who always sort of is trying to get people to have fights with each other and then sort of jumping around the action but never actually getting involved and is always the first one to leg it when there's any sign of bouncers or police. That's what he was like.
But
sorry.
An investigation has been launched, so expect absolutely nothing to happen.
Well,
on the back
nothing happened really, other than the stuff getting thrown on the pitch. But if we can't pick them out on CCTV, which none of the angles I saw picked out who was throwing it, but I don't know what else in stadium cameras there were, then there's nothing else to take action about. I'd only take action on individuals. You can't.
Do you think the ban on beer at seats made people more agitated than they needed to be?
Sorry?
Do you think not being allowed to take beer to your seat made people more agitated than they needed to be, and that wound people up a bit?
No, because some of these people obviously got beer in the seats and had probably had enough beer as it was, and maybe that decision is vindicated when you see stuff coming on the pitch.
True. Yeah, well, it completely is. I mean, the Stuart Neal was kind of enforcing it quite strongly. But yeah, this is the trouble, isn't it? You kind of. It's always for the minority that these things get banned, and it's got no chance of coming back next year, has it? Now,
no. There was one person that got caught near us, so they said, the steward was like, pass the bottle down. So he did the ultimate thing, downed it, and then passed the empty bottle to him. And everyone around us was just very respectful, like, well done. That's exactly the correct behaviour. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. We've talked about the game in broad terms. We've talked about the controversy. Maybe we should talk about some of the individuals on display. With about 7 or 8 minutes to go, I turned round to Cass and said that I'd be giving Ratchford or Clark man of the match, even if Wigan did hold on to the game and not lose, just because I thought they were the two individual players who had the most individual moments on the game, and it wasn't really their fault that their teammates didn't go with them. Whereas with Wigan, it was kind of across the board, and I also still was thinking we weren't very good. At the time, I was saying this is the worst. This is up there with Saints in 2014 as the worst winning Grand Final performance. I think I've stepped back from that a little bit. I think we were better than Saints were in 2014. Now, I've watched it back 2.5 times. But yeah. So a word on Ratchford, who won the Harry Sunderland Award, and any other players from Warrington that you guys thought stood out. I'll start with you, Tim.
Yeah, I thought Clark, for me, did acquit himself well. I thought he did as best he could. I think he did suffer from the speed of the balls that he was getting to, just weren't giving him the platform to do something off the back of. I thought Ratchford was probably my vote. As soon as I heard it announced, I was like, yeah, that makes sense, because I tried to think of who from the Wigan side who's probably been the best player, and I couldn't pick out anyone. Just to give you the context in terms of the voting, because they do release the voting for that. Ratchford got 12 votes, Manfredi got 8, George Williams 4, Gildart 3, Bateman 2, Tompkins 1, and Sean O'Loughlin got 1 as well. So there's quite an even spread of the Wigan players. But
it was a bit of a sentimental one for O'Loughlin then, because I think one of his few major impacts on the game was the switch of play for Manfredi to try, and that came after the votes were collated. So
yeah, I'm struggling to remember much that he actually individually did.
No.
Tompkins, I thought possibly might have been higher in the voting, but probably everybody has a natural dislike of him, so he suffered from that. But Bateman, I thought,
if he'd have kicked any of the goals, I think he would have been higher up. But I think that will have counted against him as well. Bateman,
I thought, stood up really well and had another excellent performance. There was a point where he just seemed to be in every defensive play. He was doing something. He was darting around from one. There was one particular set I remember paying attention to where he had crabbed across almost the whole of the field.
It was a set where he took Clark down on Clark's sort of half break with about 8 minutes left. Yeah, I spotted that exact same set the same way you did.
And Tompkins as well on him. There was the point where they switched and put him into the line and put Escray at fullback, and I thought his defence at that point was superb.
Yeah, I agree. Alan, what do you think? Ratchford, fair call for Harry Sunderland, or would you have given it to maybe Manfredi, who's the second leading contender?
I think what counted against Manfredi was the fact that his second try was after the votes had been cast. Obviously, showing bravery to come back on. But in my head, Ratchford was the outstanding individual on the pitch, whereas you could look at Wigan and I think with Wigan the votes were split, weren't there? I think between individual players. So I don't have an issue with Ratchford being the man of the match at all. He was probably the best individual performance out there.
What about any other Warrington players other than Ratchford and Clark? Were you impressed by any of their forwards? Maybe obviously Brown and Roberts aren't in the conversation, and probably neither centre either didn't really create anything. But any of the forwards impress?
Chris Hill looked good when he was on. In my opinion, I can't say I really noticed Cooper much. Murdoch Masilla flashed but didn't really do anything while he was on.
No, he seemed to get too involved in trying to give him the ball too close to the end of sets, and Wigan totally being understanding what was going on and not flinching and keeping him out, basically.
Oh, there were a couple of opportunities where he should have been the dummy and in more ways than one, and the ball should have gone out behind him, because it was an obvious play, and they diagnosed it, and that just speaks to a bit of limited halfback play, doesn't it? Which we already talked about.
Yeah, I mean, for Wigan, I thought a few of our forwards were more effective than I realised live. I think, like I said, the tension in the crowd was affecting how I saw things live, and I think some of the plays particularly from Sutton. Ryan Sutton were probably down the other end of the field and exit sets at the back end of the first half, so I didn't quite see just how much of an influence a positive influence he had on the game. And because I kept thinking all our players were going sideways, probably because I was watching from the end, not rather than the side, I didn't realise just how much meters they were actually making. But Farrell and Sutton were two that seemed particularly important, really, especially in the more contained second half game plan that Wigan had. Less errors were made, only I think 2 errors in the whole of the second half, and so less mistakes were made and much more direct running. Farrell was the one who led the way with that, actually going forwards for me, sort of in the middle of the second half towards the last 20 minutes, and Sutton then came back on for a spell right at the end and embraced all of that. So I think they were important to that. Williams was absolutely flawless in defence. I mean, some of the tackles he put in were incredible. Some one-on-ones with much bigger guys, going at pace as well. And I think he still had enough in him, the ability to make enough of the right calls at the right times to make a difference in the game. There was obviously the kick for the try. There was in the second half the kick where Davies put Charnley into touch. So you know, I thought Williams was very good. He had those 2 errors in the middle of the pitch, didn't he? But they were both him trying to be enterprising, particularly the first one in the first half. I think if that one had come off, Wigan might have been getting a try at the back end of that set. So that one was a little bit unlucky. So I do think Williams was pretty good. One long kick aside, the one that went dead. Other than that, Tompkins was awesome in the second half with his error-free display. There was that kick he took as well in goal where I thought he'd jumped from on the line, so it should have been.
I thought he was inside from looking at it at first, but then seeing the replay, he wasn't.
Yeah, well, I still think maybe I'm so biased that the replay makes me think that his heel was still on the line when he jumped. Anyway, Manfredi.
You just see what you want to see.
That's how we all work. Manfredi, though, I mean, both tries he scored, particularly the second one. I've got no idea how he was able to control his body so well to stay like as comfortably in the field as he is. I was convinced his legs were going to go out into touch when he threw that dive in. So that was absolutely brilliant, and. Yeah, and everyone remembers that tackle on Lynham, but also there was 2 other moments in the second half that I thought Manfredi absolutely nailed it. One was before he got his injury, when he took a high kick and then landed in a running start, even though there was defenders all around him, and managed to get the ball 25-30 metres up the field, which was a great clearing run from him. And there was a great take he took over his shoulder as he was running back towards his line, with Lynham and Goodwin getting to him, but he took the ball over his shoulder and took the catch in safely. So I mean, it wasn't the greatest kick from Kevin Brown, but there was still work for Manfredi to do, and he did it really well. So I think all those individual moments combined mean that he probably would have won the Harry Sunderland if the voting was done 2 minutes after it was done. I mean, what a story, Manfredi, as well. I mean, Tim, what do you think about the resilience it takes? Have you ever had an injury that's kept you out of anything for 2 years and then come back to have this kind of an impact in your volleyball career? Obviously,
I've had an injury that's kept me out for 2 years, but I then came back for about 6 weeks and then retired very quickly. I tore my Achilles tendon, so that was a really horrible injury. It took me a long time to get back, and I got back and then realised that playing in the position I played in volleyball terms, I wasn't going to get back. It was something that required jumping up and down quite a lot. I wasn't going to get back to where I was, so I couldn't hit that height again, despite all the training I did to actually make the comeback. So, and I've done enough injuries to know that mindset you get into, it's very easy to get sucked in very negative very quickly, partly because it's probably less of a problem in professional sport, where you do feel very cut off from the group. So you're used to being in the team, doing everything with the group, and then suddenly you go into this mindset where you're out on your own. And even if you are in a professional environment, you are training separately. You're not seeing everybody. You're not having all the banter and the stupidity that goes on at training. So you do miss all that. You do get sucked into a negative mindset. So then to show the mental fortitude as much as anything, to be able to come through and accelerate from not playing just over a month ago to suddenly being back, and not only being back at the top level but excelling as he did, is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant story. And if Manfredi's story didn't get you emotional, then obviously the people who were leaving Wigan and their interviews on the pitch and interviews that were done after the game might get you. And just when you thought that there was no,
well, we would have done if Will Perry had actually let any of them actually talk rather than just talking himself.
Well,